everyone, today I have my hands on the brand new Lumix S1R2. I'm going to be testing this camera out in the field for both photo and video. I'm going to share with you my thoughts and my review of this camera. I have heaps of photos and footage to share with you. We have a lot to get into, so let's get started. The Lumix S1R2 is a 44 megapixel camera featuring a new full frame sensor. Today I have not only a portrait photo shoot, but also some landscape and travel shots to share as well. As always, this review is not sponsored. Lumix don't ask me to say anything and don't check my video before I post it. My aim with these reviews is to always share with you my real experiences, both the good and bad, so let's get into it. You might think this location looks like a green screen, but I can assure you it is very real. The S1R2 makes use of phase hybrid autofocus and has 779 phase AF detection points. For these tests, I'm making use of the Lumix 35mm f1.8 and I have the camera set to responsive, continuous autofocus with human AF. I do have to mention that I am using a pre-production version of the S1R2 though, so some things may be different on release. The tests in Joshua Tree were done on an older firmware version, so I tested it out at home again with the final firmware that was provided to us to be able to show you that footage as well. This camera has a heap of subject recognition modes where you can choose to focus not only on the general subject, but also options to focus on specific parts of that subject. These include human, animal, car, motorcycle, train, and airplane AF. Similarly to the S5 II and S9, this camera continues focusing on a subject even as they turn around, which I find really handy. Autofocus is super sticky and persistent with the subject in both stills and video mode. I find it does a great job at keeping up with a moving subject, as you can see from these examples, with only a minimal amount of focus slipping. I was relying 100% on autofocus anytime I used the camera and found it to be very reliable. Locked on autofocus though was really hit and miss for me personally, and I would like to see it be stronger with future firmware updates. Sometimes it was great at keeping focus on me, and other times it will lose me when it should have held focus, unfortunately. Let's head over to our portrait photo shoot. Today's model is Devon, Lydia is on hair and makeup, and Dan is filming the behind the scenes. I'm going to be showing you 100% crops of the unedited, straight out of camera images. This way, you can see the true detail and colors you're able to capture with this camera. I also have my edited version to share afterwards as well. The colors straight out of camera from this sensor are absolutely stunning. This is something I don't normally mention or talk about since I shoot RAW and I edit all my photos anyway, but this sensor is so impressive that I can't not mention it. While I was shooting with it, I would constantly be admiring just how beautiful the unedited photos looked. There is a really nice render on greens particularly, and I think the skin tones are so soft and flattering. I just keep choosing like the windy spot. I want to try maybe crouching if we're a bit lower. Maybe the wind isn't going to hit us so much. Aside from the colors, this camera produces stunningly sharp and clear images. I'm using the Lumix S 50mm f1.8 for this shoot. It's nice to finally have a Lumix camera with a higher resolution sensor and hybrid phase autofocus. There have been a couple of videos where I mentioned the S5 II is a great camera, but we need a little bit more resolution to really see the quality of lenses. Well, this camera is just that. Speaking of resolution, I have a feeling that some people might be a little disappointed to hear this S1R2 is a 44 megapixel sensor. Should it have had more megapixels to be given the R label, which we associate with resolution? For some context, the original S1R is 47.3 megapixels, and in comparison to other cameras on the market, Sony and Leica are really the only companies offering a full-frame 60 megapixel sensor. Nikon Z7 II, Z8, and Z9 are all around 46 megapixels. The Canon R5 II is also 45 megapixels, so I think this S1R2 fits in nicely in that lineup. If you do want larger images for landscapes, the S1R2 has a high resolution mode where you can capture 177 megapixel files handheld and on a tripod, which I tried out while I was in White Sands National Park. The camera will stitch this high-res mode photo in camera. This camera shoots in up to 40 FPS blackout free with the electronic shutter or up to 10 FPS with the mechanical shutter. I found the buffer to be reliable during a typical portrait session. I did feel the buffer a few times when I was capturing heaps of walking and movement shots of my subject as I was shooting RAW plus JPEG fine images simultaneously and to one CF card. I tested it out on another day and I was able to shoot up to 96 RAW images in speed priority or 110 RAW images in image priority before the buffer would fill up, and then it would still let me shoot but at a slower rate. At no point did it let me stop shooting, which is great. Something I am extremely excited has been added into this camera is the option to turn constant preview on and off when in full manual mode. Ever since the S5 II launch, every time I've had a chance to talk to an engineer or someone from Lumix, I would ask them about constant preview and if they could add an option to just turn it off. I've also seen a few people asking for this online as well. I find on the S5 II and S9 this function is very distracting, especially if you like to shoot either slightly under or overexposed, as the screen will constantly flash with different exposures every time you press the shutter. It would also occasionally make me capture the shot with incorrect exposure. I have ruined some photos in the past because of this function, so I'm really happy to now have the option to turn it off. So thank you Lumix for listening to all of us. I am happy with the in-focus ratio from this camera. This shoot with Devon was done on a much earlier firmware version on the S1R2, and I noticed there were quite a few eyelash-focused photos. Let's shoot here. I think it'd be cool if you stand just there in like an archway of flowers, which looks really cool. I did other photo shoots since then, including one on the second last firmware update I received, and the ratio is so much stronger now. The majority of photos have critical focus on the iris with only a very small handful of images with eyelash focusing. I could easily rely on the autofocus of this camera for portraits and weddings. Couple of other things I want to mention is Lumix have been hard at work with the software side of things. So this S1R2 works with Lumix Lab app and Frame.io. They are also introducing the new Lumix Flow app where you can make and shoot storyboards with and use your phone as a monitor and camera control so you don't have to bring an external monitor with you at all times. At the moment, it does feel like it's missing some critical features such as log assist for Vlog in the app, which I have raised with Lumix, but it'll be great to see where this app goes from here in the future. The S1R2 weighs 795 grams and features a tilt and flippy screen, which in my opinion is an absolute must to be considered a professional camera nowadays. It's very comfortable to hold with quite a large hand grip, and here is both Dan and I holding it with the largest lens we have. The viewfinder is great to use. It's very large and bright and has up to 120 FPS refresh rates. The S1R2 features a new mode dial which switches between stills, video and SNQ mode pretty instantly, and it of course has dual card slots. You also have the option of recording straight to SSD via USB. When doing video, this camera has a tally light on the front. You have the ability to lock individual dials rather than everything at once, as well as the addition to close the shutter when the camera's off. Dan and I had the chance to use the S1R2 in so many different weather conditions while we were traveling, from extremely dry and dusty deserts to rain and even a little bit of snow and -Celsius temperatures, and they didn't skip a beat at all. It is rated to be dust, splash and freeze proof by Lumix. The S1R2 is the first Lumix camera to feature 8K video in up to 30p 10-bit. You are also able to film in 4K 120 and 60p 422 10-bit in full area mode, which is almost full frame. There is a tiny little crop induced, as you can see here when I flick between 25 and 50p. Now, the star of the show, in pixel by pixel mode, you can record internally up to 5.8K Apple ProRes RAW. Yes, RAW internally straight to your CFB Express card. I was able to adjust the tones of some pretty tricky footage filmed in ProRes RAW and recover all the highlights. Since this is a Lumix camera, you of course also have the option to utilize up to 6.4K 30p 10-bit OpenGate, which there has been news it will be opened up to 8.1K with a future firmware update. As always, I have to mention that even though Lumix are reliable when it comes to firmware updates, you should always purchase a camera or lens with the expectation that it's the final product at launch. There are so many internal recording formats, and if I were to test each one, we would be here forever. In Dan and I's opinion, ProRes 4K and MOV 4K in up to 60p would be a lot of videographers' bread and butter codecs that would get used for extended periods of time. While we were filming our personal vlogs and travels while we were overseas, we were using 4K 50p ProRes HQ most of the time. Just like stills, the quality of video is really beautiful. The footage is clear and sharp, and we have a great range of colors and dynamic range to work with. Since Lumix have such an extensive range of video features, I can see this camera being used from hobbyists to professionals and also even production companies. The S1R2 is introducing new stabilization modes, including Advanced Active IS, E-Stabilization High Mode, and for the first time in any camera, a cropless mode digital stabilization, which, as you guessed, does not crop. Cropless mode helps you get an even smoother looking result to standard IBIS, but the catch is that it only works with Lumix lenses. So if you use Sigma lenses like Dan does, for example, he uses the 28-45 f1.8 quite a lot, it means you won't be able to make use of this. This camera has 8 stops of active image stabilization, and to compare, the Lumix S5 II and X have 5 stops and the S1R has 6 stops. As usual with Lumix cameras, their IBIS is a real standout for me. All these shots are handheld with no gimbal, no monopod, no Joby. I really like this as you can keep your setup compact but still capture professional looking results. During our time using this camera overseas, Dan and I mostly made use of mechanical stabilization only. We would turn E-stabilization on an as-needed basis, and occasionally we used Boost IS on longer focal lengths. Let's talk about overheating, because Dan and I did run into this while using these cameras. With MOV files such as 8 or 4K in 420 10-bit, which are lighter codecs, we had no issues recording over an hour. Where I did get the camera to overheat is recording in high bitrate codecs that are very data hungry, such as ProRes HQ. I was able to record around 26 minutes until the camera stops recording to cool itself down. It takes about 5 minutes until it's ready to record again, and I'm able to record another roughly 10-minute clip before it needs to cool down again. Additionally, when sending 1080p over HDMI while recording ProRes internally, it would overheat even quicker. So if you are planning on filming long recordings with this camera, it would be best in lighter bitrates and MOV or MP4 files rather than ProRes. As always, I have a microphone test for you. So you've been listening to the audio of my lav mic. Now I'm going to switch over to the audio of the inbuilt microphone of the S1R2 and just talk a little bit. I am getting eaten alive by mosquitoes right now, which is so annoying. Now I have wind noise canceller switched to standard. It is a little bit breezy today, but there is more like bird noise around me than anything. And finally, we'll do a test with this on high as well, because sometimes these functions can make your voice sound funny. So I think it's good to just show you what it sounds like, Finally, you're listening to 32-bit flow audio with the XLR2 attached to the camera. This is going to record the 32-bit flow audio internally, which is awesome. Again, the traffic noise is really picked up and the wind is slowly picking up too. Next, I would usually show you vlogging shots, but I actually filmed on these cameras during my entire America road trip that I did with Dan. So I'm going to be uploading those vlogs in the next couple of weeks. So you are going to have so much more footage to look at if you're interested in that. Overall, the S1R2 is a fantastic camera and I really enjoyed my time using it. This camera is strong for both professional photo and video use, and I would say it has one of the strongest video feature sets on the market right now. In comparison to the S5 II, for photo, you would go for the S1R2 if you need higher resolution images for your work. When it comes to video, the key upgrades in the S1R2 compared to the S5 II include 8K recording, improved IBIS, close to no crop 60 and 120p options, ProRes codecs, and a wide range of additional video features. Last but not least, I have some low light ISO photos. These are the JPEGs straight out of camera with noise reduction set to 0. Since this is a high resolution sensor, I was expecting to see more noise, but this camera keeps the files pretty clean. Focus was also great during this low light test. For me personally, up to around ISO 5000 to 6400 is pretty usable. After that, it has too much of a watercolor effect for me, but I'll leave these up here so you can see for yourself as well. That is all I have for today's review of the S1R2. Let me know what you think of this camera in the comments, what you thought of the photo shoots and the footage. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I make new videos every single week, so I'll see you all next time. Bye.